Bikers stole a Marine's remains to deliver them home. When they opened the container, in the small town of Millbrook, nestled in the heart of America's Midwest, Margaret Wilson sat alone in her modest home, staring at a letter that had just arrived. At 65, Margaret was a pillar of strength in her community, known for her volunteer work at the local Veterans Center and her unwavering support for the troops. Today, that strength was crumbling. The letter, bearing the official seal of the United States Marine Corps, informed her that the remains of her only son, Lance Corporal James Wilson, would be shipped to her via courier service within the week. James had been killed in action in Afghanistan, giving his life to save his fellow Marines during an ambush. Margaret's hands trembled as she reread the cold, formal words. James had been her world since her husband, also a Marine, had passed away a decade ago. Now, she was truly alone. Across town, at the Steel Angels Motorcycle Club, a very different scene was unfolding. The club president, Mike Grizzly Thompson, 50-year-old Vietnam veteran with a gruff exterior and a heart of gold, was addressing his fellow bikers. The Steel Angels weren't your typical motorcycle club. They were a group of veterans and patriotic citizens dedicated to honoring fallen soldiers and supporting their families. "Listen up, brothers and sisters," Grizzly's voice boomed across the clubhouse. "We've just got word that one of our own is coming home, but not the way he should be." The room fell silent as Grizzly explained the situation with James Wilson's remains. The Steel Angels had a long-standing tradition of escorting fallen soldiers home, providing a guard of honor on their final journey. The idea that a local hero would be unceremoniously shipped home like a package was unthinkable to them. Among the crowd, a young woman named Sarah Jenkins listened intently. At 28, Sarah was one of the newest members of the Steel Angels. She had joined after returning from her own tour in Iraq, finding solace and purpose in the club's mission. Sarah had known James in high school, and the news of his death hit her hard. As Grizzly finished speaking, a murmur of anger and disbelief rippled through the room. The bikers exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of outrage and determination. They all knew what needed to be done, but the question was how. It was Sarah who spoke up first, her voice clear and resolute. "We can't let this happen. James deserves better. His mother deserves better. We need to do something." Grizzly nodded, a glimmer of pride in his eyes at the young veteran's initiative. "You're damn right we do. But we're talking about intercepting a military shipment here. It's not going to be easy, and it sure as hell ain't going to be legal." The room fell silent again as the implications of what they were considering sank in. They were all patriots, many of them veterans themselves. The idea of going against military protocol was not something they took lightly. But as they looked around at each other, the walls adorned with photos of fallen comrades and American flags, a sense of resolve settled over the group. They had always prided themselves on doing what was right, not just what was easy or legal. Grizzly's voice cut through the silence once more. "All right, Angels, we've got a mission. Who's in?" Every hand in the room shot up without hesitation. The Steel Angels were about to embark on their most daring and controversial mission yet, one that would test their resolve, challenge their principles, and ultimately redefine what it means to honor a fallen hero. The next morning, the Steel Angels gathered at their clubhouse, the gravity of their decision weighing heavily on each of them. Grizzly stood before the group, a large map of the state spread out on the table in front of him. "All right, listen up," he began, his voice gruff but determined. "We've got intel that Lance Corporal Wilson's remains will be arriving at the Springfield Airport cargo terminal in 3 days. Our window of opportunity is narrow, and the risks are high." Sarah, who had taken point on gathering information, stepped forward. "I've been in touch with a friend who works at the airport. The shipment is scheduled to arrive on Flight 1775 at 2:30 p.m. It'll be transferred to a courier service within an hour of landing." Grizzly nodded, expression grim. "That means we need to intercept it before the transfer. Once it's in the courier's hands, it'll be too late." The room buzzed with tension as the reality of what they were planning sank in. They were talking about essentially hijacking a military shipment. If caught, they could face serious legal consequences. "I know what we're all thinking," Grizzly continued, his eyes scanning the room. This isn't just illegal. It goes against everything we've stood for as patriots and veterans. Sometimes, doing the right thing means breaking the rules. He paused, letting his words sink in. Anyone who wants to back out, now's the time. No judgment, no hard feelings. The room remained silent, each member standing firm in their resolve. Sarah spoke up again, her voice steady. I've been thinking about the logistics. We can't just storm the airport. We need a plan that minimizes the risk and doesn't cause a scene. For the next hour, the Steel Angels hashed out their strategy. They would send a small team, posing as airport workers, to intercept the shipment before it reached the courier service. Meanwhile, the rest of the club would be stationed at strategic points around the airport, ready to provide backup or a diversion if needed. As the meeting wound down, Grizzly pulled Sarah aside. I want you to lead the intercept team, he said, his tone serious. You've got the military experience and you knew James. Feels right that you should be the one to bring him home. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. I won't let you down, Grizzly. I won't let James down. The next 2 days were a flurry of activity. The Steel Angels worked tirelessly, gathering equipment, rehearsing their plan, and preparing for every possible contingency. They also reached out to their network of contacts, calling in favors and ensuring they had eyes and ears in all the right places. On the morning of the operation, Club gathered one last time. The atmosphere was tense, each member acutely aware of what was at stake. Grizzly stood before them, his usual gruff demeanor softened by the gravity of the moment. Today, we ride for James, began, his voice low but powerful. We ride for every soldier who gave their life for this country. We ride for every family who's had to bear the unbearable weight of loss. What we're doing today isn't just about one Marine or one mother. It's about showing the world that our heroes deserve more than to be shipped home like packages. A murmur of agreement rippled through the group. Remember, Grizzly continued, our goal is to get James home with dignity. No violence, no confrontation if we can help it. We're not criminals, we're patriots doing what needs to be done. With that, the Steel Angels mounted their bikes and roared off towards Springfield Airport, their hearts pounding with a mix of adrenaline and purpose. At the airport, Sarah and her small team, dressed in borrowed airport uniforms, made their way to the cargo terminal. Their fake IDs, procured through less than legal means, got them through security without a hitch. As they approached the area where Flight 1775's cargo would be unloaded, Sarah felt her nerves jangling. Everything hinged on the next few minutes. If their intel was wrong, security was tighter than expected, if anyone asked the wrong questions, everything could fall apart. The cargo plane taxied to a stop, and Sarah watched with bated breath as the unloading began. Her eyes scanned the crates and containers, searching for the one that would contain James's remains. And then she saw it. Container marked with military insignia, handled with noticeable care by the airport workers. Sarah's heart clenched. In that nondescript box were the remains of her friend, a hero who had given everything for his country. She gave a subtle nod to her team, and they moved into action. With practiced ease, they integrated themselves into the unloading process, gradually maneuvering closer to the precious cargo. Just as Sarah's hand touched the container, a shout rang out across the terminal. Hey, you there, stop. Sarah's heart leapt into her throat as she turned to see a security guard rushing towards them, hand on his radio. In that moment, time seemed to stand still. Everything they had planned, everything they stood for, hung in the balance. Sarah made a split-second decision. They had come too far to turn back now. With a quick gesture to her team, she lifted the container and they began to move quickly, but calmly, towards the exit. The security guard's shouts grew louder, joined by others. Sarah could hear the crackle of radios, the pounding of feet. But she kept moving, her mind focused on one thing only, getting James home to his mother. As they burst through the terminal doors into the bright afternoon sunlight, Sarah saw a welcome sight. The rest of the Steel Angels were there, engines roaring, ready to escort them to safety. In that moment, as she secured the precious cargo and swung onto the back of a waiting bike, Sarah knew their real challenge was just beginning. They had James, but now they had to get him home. The law, undoubtedly, in hot pursuit. The Steel Angels roared away from the airport, a procession of leather-clad guardians on a mission. They had taken an incredible risk, crossed a line they could never uncross. But as the wind whipped past them and the airport faded into the distance, each of them knew in their hearts that they had done the right thing. Lance Corporal James Wilson was going home, not in a courier's van, but with a guard of honor. And the Steel Angels were prepared to face whatever consequences came their way to see this mission through. As the Steel Angels sped away from the airport, the gravity of what they had just done began to sink in. They were now, by definition, criminals. They had stolen federal property and interfered with a military process. The consequences could be severe. But amidst the adrenaline and fear, there was also a sense of righteous purpose. They were bringing a fallen hero home with the dignity he deserved. Sarah, riding pillion with James's remains secured in front of her, felt a complex mix of emotions. Relief at having successfully retrieved James, anxiety about what would happen next, and an overwhelming sense of responsibility for the precious cargo in her care. As they rode, Grizzly's voice crackled over their helmet communicators. "Change of plans, Angels. We've got company. State troopers have been alerted. We need to split up." Sarah's heart raced as she saw flashing lights in the distance behind them. This was the scenario they had hoped to avoid, but had prepared for nonetheless. "Sarah, you take James and head north with Mike and Lisa," Grizzly commanded. "The rest of us will create a diversion. Remember the rendezvous point. Good luck. Godspeed." With heavy hearts but unwavering determination, the Steel Angels divided. Sarah and her small group veered off onto a side road while the main group continued on the highway, leading the pursuing troopers away. As they rode through back roads and small towns, Sarah's mind was whirling. They had planned for this, but the reality of being on the run with the remains of a fallen Marine was almost overwhelming. After several hours of tense riding, constantly on the lookout for law enforcement, they arrived at their safe house, an old barn on a sympathetic veteran's property. As they secured their bikes and brought James's remains inside, Sarah finally had a moment to breathe. It was then that she noticed something odd about the container. There was a small, almost imperceptible seam along one side that didn't look standard. Curious and slightly apprehensive, Sarah carefully examined the container. To her shock, she found a hidden compartment. Inside was a sealed envelope with a military seal. With trembling hands, Sarah opened it, and as she read its contents, her eyes widened in disbelief. "Guys?" called out, her voice shaky. "You need to see this." Mike and Lisa gathered around as Sarah explained what she had found. The letter inside was from James's commanding officer, and it contained information that changed everything. James hadn't just died saving his fellow Marines. He had uncovered a conspiracy involving high-ranking officials selling classified information to enemy forces. The information in the letter implicated several powerful figures in the government and military. This is why they wanted to ship him home quietly, Sarah realized, her voice a mix of awe and anger. They were trying to cover this up. The implications were staggering. Their act of defiance in bringing James home hadn't just been about honoring a fallen soldier. They had unknowingly intercepted crucial evidence of a major national security breach. As the Steel Angels grappled with this revelation, they realized their mission had just become far more complex and dangerous. They weren't just up against law enforcement now, but potentially against shadowy forces who would stop at nothing to keep this information buried. "We need to get this information to someone we can trust," Mike said, face grim. "Someone who can expose this without it being buried again." Sarah nodded, her mind racing. "I think I know someone, a journalist I met during my time in Iraq. She's relentless and has contacts in high places. If anyone can get this story out, it's her." As they debated their next move, one thing became clear. Their mission was no longer just about bringing James home. It was about ensuring his final act of heroism wasn't in vain. They needed to expose the truth he had died to uncover. The Steel Angels looked at each other, the weight of their newfound responsibility settling heavily on their shoulders. They had started this journey to honor a fallen brother, but now they found themselves in the middle of something much bigger. "Whatever happens," Sarah said, her voice firm with resolve, "we see this through. For James. For the truth. For our country. The others nodded solemnly. What had begun as a mission of honor had transformed into a fight for justice. The road ahead was uncertain and fraught with danger. The Steel Angels were prepared to ride it to the end, no matter the cost. As night fell, they began to plan their next move, knowing that every decision from this point on could have far-reaching consequences. The simple act of bringing a hero home had set in motion events that could shake the foundations of power in Washington. And the Steel Angels were at the heart of it all. Sarah stood outside the old barn, the cool night air a stark contrast to the heated discussions taking place inside. The revelation of James's final mission and the conspiracy he had uncovered thrown their already complicated situation into chaos. Steel Angels were divided on how to proceed. Some, like Mike, argued for immediately taking the information to the authority. "We're in deep enough as it is," he had said. "Maybe if we turn this over, they'll go easy on us." Others, including Lisa, wanted to stick to their original plan of getting James home to his mother first. "That's why we started this," she had insisted. "We can deal with the rest after." As the de facto leader of their small group, Sarah knew the decision ultimately fell to her. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath as she weighed their options. The enormity of the situation pressed down on her like a physical weight. After several long moments, Sarah opened her eyes, her decision made. She walked back into the barn, her posture straight and determined. "Listen up," she said, her voice cutting through the ongoing debate. "We're going to do both. We're taking James home to his mother, but we're also going to expose this conspiracy. Here's how we're going to do it." Sarah laid out her plan. They would continue their journey to bring James home, but along the way they would reach out to Sarah's journalist contact. They would arrange a meeting to hand over the evidence, but only after they had completed their original mission. "We started this to honor James and give his mother the closure she deserves," Sarah explained. "We finish that first, but we also make sure James's final act of heroism isn't forgotten." The consequences of Sarah's decision were immediate and far-reaching. The Steel Angels sprang into action, their sense of purpose renewed. Sarah reached out to her journalist contact, a woman named Alexis Chen, known for her hard-hitting exposés on government corruption. Alexis was initially skeptical, but the mention of classified information in a military cover-up piqued her interest. She agreed to meet them, but warned that she would need concrete evidence before she could run with such an explosive story. As they prepared to move out, the gravity of their situation became clearer. News reports were flooding in about the theft of a fallen soldier's remains by a domestic terrorist group. Their faces were plastered across every news channel, branded as criminals and traitors. The journey to James's hometown was tense and fraught with close calls. They traveled only at night, sticking to back roads and relying on a network of sympathetic veterans for shelter and supplies. Every mile brought them closer to their goal, but also increased the risk of discovery. 3 days into their journey, disaster struck. At a routine gas stop, they were recognized by the station attendant. Within minutes, police sirens were wailing in the distance. Steel Angels were forced to split up once again, with Sarah and Mike taking James's remains while Lisa created a diversion. As they sped away into the night, the weight of the consequences of their actions pressed down on Sarah. They were now fugitives, wanted by every law enforcement agency in the country. The thought of Lisa, possibly caught or on the run alone, filled her with guilt and worry. There was no turning back now. They had committed to this course of action, and they would see it through to the end. 2 more days of tense travel brought them to the outskirts of James's hometown. As they approached Margaret Wilson's house under the cover of darkness, Sarah's heart was pounding. This was the moment they had fought so hard for. Leaving Mike with the bikes, Sarah carefully carried the container with James's remains to the front door. Her hand trembled as she rang the doorbell. Margaret Wilson opened the door, her eyes widening in shock as she recognized Sarah from the news report. Before she could speak, Sarah gently said, "Mrs. Wilson, I'm here to bring James home." The older woman's hand flew to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes as understanding dawned. Without a word, she ushered Sarah inside. The next hour was filled with tears, explanations, and a solemn ceremony as they transferred James's remains into the flag-draped coffin Margaret had prepared. As dawn broke, Sarah knew it was time to leave. They still had one more mission to complete. "Mrs. Wilson," Sarah said softly, "there's something else you need to know about James. He died a hero in more ways than one." Sarah explained about the conspiracy James had uncovered, showing Margaret the letter they had found. The older woman listened in stunned silence, her expression shifting from grief to pride to determination. "What can I do to help?" Margaret asked, her voice strong despite the tears in her eyes. This was the consequence of their decision that Sarah hadn't anticipated. Allies in unexpected places. With Margaret's help, they were able to arrange a secure meeting with Alexis Chen. As Sarah prepared to leave, Margaret hugged her tightly. "Thank you," she whispered, "for bringing my boy home and for making sure his final mission is completed." With renewed determination, Sarah and Mike set off to meet Alexis. The journalist was true to her word, grilling them intensively about the evidence before agreeing to run the story. She promised to keep their involvement anonymous, but warned them that once the story broke, the authorities would redouble their efforts to find them. As they watched Alexis drive away with the evidence, Sarah and Mike exchanged a look of mingled relief and apprehension. They had accomplished their mission, but at what cost? They were still fugitives, separated from their friends, branded as criminals by the country they had fought to protect. "What now?" Mike asked, voicing the question that had been on both their minds. Sarah took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. "Now we face the music. We turn ourselves in, tell our side of the story. We've done what we set out to do. James is home, and the truth will come out. Whatever happens next, we face it head on." Mike nodded, a mix of resignation and pride on his face. "Been an honor riding with you, Sarah." As they mounted their bikes for what might be the last time, Sarah felt a complex mix of emotions. Fear of what awaited them, pride in what they had accomplished, sadness for the price they and their friends might have to pay. But underlying it all was a sense of peace. They had done the right thing, honored their fallen brother, and exposed a truth that needed to be heard. Whatever consequences lay ahead, Sarah knew she could face them, with her head held high. They had started this journey to bring a hero home, and in the process had become heroes themselves in a way they never could have anticipated. As the sun rose on a new day, Sarah and Mike rode towards an uncertain future, secure in the knowledge that they had lived up to the highest ideals of the Steel Angels and the Marines they had once served with. They had proven that sometimes doing the unthinkable was the only way to do what was right. While Sarah and Mike were completing their mission, a parallel story was unfolding back in their hometown. Grizzly, the Steel Angels president, found himself facing an unexpected challenge that would test his leadership and the club's unity. The day after the airport incident, as news of the theft spread like wildfire, Grizzly called an emergency meeting at the clubhouse. The atmosphere was tense. Some members were having second thoughts about their involvement, worried about the legal consequences they might face. As Grizzly tried to maintain order and rally the troops, an unexpected visitor arrived, Agent Karen Martinez of the FBI. She strode into the clubhouse, her presence immediately silencing the room. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice calm but authoritative, "I think we need to have a chat." For the next hour, Agent Martinez grilled Grizzly and the other Angels about their involvement in the airport incident. Grizzly, drawing on years of experience dealing with law enforcement, managed to reveal nothing while maintaining a cooperative demeanor. As the agent prepared to leave, seemingly frustrated by the lack of information, she paused at the door. "You know," she said, turning back to face Grizzly, "I get it, I really do. My brother was a Marine. But this isn't the way to honor your fallen comrade." After she left, the clubhouse erupted into chaos. Some members wanted to come clean, arguing that it was only a matter of time before they were caught. Others insisted on maintaining silence, believing that Sarah and Mike would complete the mission if given enough time. Grizzly found himself caught in the middle, trying to hold the club together while also protecting Sarah and Mike's mission. It was the greatest test of his leadership since founding the Steel Angels. As days passed, pressure mounted. Local law enforcement, spurred on by the FBI, increased their surveillance of the club. Some members' families began to receive visits from agents, adding to the strain. Grizzly knew he needed to do something to keep the club united and protect their mission. After much deliberation, he came up with a risky plan. He called another meeting, this time including not just club members, but also their families and several respected community leaders who had supported the Steel Angels in the past. "Listen up," Grizzly began, his voice grave. "What we did for the right reasons, but now we need to face the consequences of our action. We're going to hold a press conference." The room exploded with protests, but Grizzly held up his hand for silence. "We're not going to reveal anything about Sarah and Mike's whereabouts or the details of the mission. We're going to talk about why we did what we did. We're going to remind people what it means to honor our fallen soldiers." Over the next few days, Grizzly worked tirelessly to prepare. He reached out to veterans groups across the state, rallying support. He contacted sympathetic media outlets, ensuring their side of the story would be heard. The day of the press conference arrived. The Steel Angels, standing united behind Grizzly, faced a sea of cameras and microphones. Grizzly stepped up to the podium, his usual gruff demeanor replaced by a solemn dignity. "We are here today to address our actions at Springfield Airport," he began. "We want to be clear. We do not regret bringing one of our fallen brothers home with the honor he deserves. What we regret is that it came to this. That in this great nation, we have forgotten how to properly honor those who have given everything for our freedom." As Grizzly continued, detailing the impersonal way fallen soldiers were sometimes treated and the toll it took on families, the mood in the room began to shift. Reporters who had come expecting to confront criminals found themselves moved by the passion and sincerity of Steel Angels. By the end of the press conference, the narrative had begun to change. While law enforcement still considered their actions illegal, public opinion was swinging in their favor. Veterans groups across the country began to speak out, sharing similar stories and calling for changes in how fallen soldiers were brought home. As Grizzly and the Angels left the press conference, they were met not with handcuffs, but with a crowd of supporters. Veterans, family members of fallen soldiers, and ordinary citizens had gathered to show their support. Agent Martinez was there too, watching from the sidelines. As Grizzly passed her, she gave him a small nod of respect. No words were exchanged, but an understanding passed between them. The Steel Angels had taken a stand, and while the legal battle was far from over, they had succeeded in starting a national conversation about how America honors its fallen heroes. Grizzly knew that whatever happened next, they had stayed true to their principles and their brotherhood. As he looked at the determined faces of his fellow Angels, Grizzly felt a surge of pride. They had weathered the storm together and had emerged stronger for it. Now, all they could do was hope that Sarah and Mike would complete their mission and return home safely. As the days turned into weeks, the relationship between Sarah and Mike evolved in ways neither of them had anticipated. Their shared mission, the constant danger, and the weight of their choices had forged a bond between them that went beyond their previous camaraderie as fellow Steel Angels. Holed up in a series of safe houses, always on the move, they found themselves relying on each other not just for physical safety, for emotional support as well. The stress of their situation was immense, and they often found solace in late-night conversation, sharing their fears, hopes, and memories. One night, as they sat on the porch of a remote cabin, Mike turned to Sarah, his expression serious. "You know, when we started this, I thought I knew why I was doing it. For James, for Cor, for what was right. But now, I think I'm doing it for you too." Sarah looked at him, surprised by the admission. "What do you mean?" Mike ran a hand through his hair, searching for the right words. "The way you've led us, the strength you've shown. I've never met anyone like you, Sarah. You make me want to be better, to live up to the ideals we're fighting for." Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest, feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time. But with it came a pang of guilt. "Mike, I don't know if I deserve that. I'm the one who got us into this mess." Mike shook his head firmly. "No, you're the one who had the courage to do what was right, no matter the cost. That's why I'll follow you wherever this road takes us." As they continued their journey, this newfound closeness between them became both a source of strength and a complication. They were in the middle of a high-stakes mission, fugitives from the law. There was no room for romantic entanglements or divided loyalty. Yet as they faced danger after danger together, their feelings continued to deepen. It wasn't just attraction, it was a profound understanding and respect that had grown between them. Their evolving relationship didn't go unnoticed by Alexis Chen, the journalist they were working with to expose the conspiracy. During one of their clandestine meetings, she pulled Sarah aside. "Be careful," Alexis warned, her voice low. "I've seen the way you two look at each other. Emotions can cloud judgment. And you can't afford that right now." Sarah nodded, understanding the wisdom in Alexis's words. But she also knew that her connection with Mike had been a crucial factor in their survival and success so far. As they neared the final stages of their mission, the tension between them reached a boiling point. They had just narrowly escaped a checkpoint, the adrenaline still coursing through their veins as they found shelter in an abandoned barn. "We almost didn't make it," Mike said, his voice shaky. "Sarah, if anything happens, I need you to know." Sarah cut him off, placing a finger on his lips. "I know," she said softly. "I feel it too. But we can't, Mike, not now. We have to focus on the mission." Mike nodded, understanding but clearly pained. "And after, if we make it through this?" Sarah allowed herself a small smile. After, we'll talk, we'll figure it out together." This unspoken promise became another driving force for both of them. It was something to look forward to. Future to fight for, beyond just clearing their names and exposing the truth. Their relationship also began to influence their decision-making. When faced with the choice of taking a risky shortcut or a longer, safer route, they found themselves erring on the side of caution more often than not. The stakes had become personal in a way that went beyond their mission. As they worked with Alexis to piece together the final parts of the story, Sarah and Mike's complementary skills came to the forefront. Sarah's strategic thinking and Mike's attention to detail made them a formidable team. Alexis remarked more than once that their synergy was remarkable. "You two communicate without even speaking sometimes," she observed. "It's like watching a well-oiled machine." This deep understanding proved crucial in the final stages of their mission. When they finally made the decision to turn themselves in, it was a choice they made together, arriving at the same conclusion simultaneously. The night before they were set to surrender to the authorities, Sarah and Mike sat together, their hands intertwined. No words were needed. They both understood the magnitude of what they had been through and what still lay ahead. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Sarah said quietly, "I'm glad it was you by my side through all this." Mike squeezed her hand. "We started this together. We'll finish it together. And after, we have a conversation to finish." As dawn broke on what could be their last day of freedom, Sarah and Mike faced it not just as comrades or friends, but as two people who had found something precious amidst the chaos of their mission. Their relationship had become a testament to the idea that even in the darkest times, there was room for growth, for connection, for love. They knew that the road ahead would be difficult. They would face interrogations, possible imprisonment, and the judgment of the public. But they also knew that they had forged a bond that could weather any storm. Whatever the future held, they would face it side by side, their relationship a source of strength in the challenges to come. As they mounted their bikes for the last time, ready to ride into an uncertain future, Sarah and Mike exchanged a look that said more than words ever could. In each other, they had found not just a partner in their mission, their partner in life, and that, perhaps, was the most unexpected and precious outcome of their unthinkable journey. The day of reckoning had arrived. Sarah and Mike, after weeks on the run, had decided to turn themselves in, but not before ensuring that the truth about James's final mission and the conspiracy he uncovered come to light. They had arranged to meet Alexis Chen one last time at a busy public park in the heart of Washington, D.C. The choice of location was deliberate. They wanted witnesses, they wanted it to be public. If anything went wrong, if they were arrested before they could share their story, they wanted the world to see. As they approached the meeting point, Sarah and Mike were hyper-aware of their surroundings. Every passing car, every person on their phone could be a potential threat. They had come too far to fail now. Alexis was already there, sitting on a bench with a briefcase by her side. As Sarah and Mike sat down on either side of her, she spoke without looking at them. "Are you sure about this? Once I publish, there's no going back." Sarah nodded firmly. "We're sure." It's time the truth came out. Alexis handed them each a copy of her article. "It's all here. The conspiracy James uncovered, the cover-up, everything. It goes live in 1 hour." As they read through the article, Sarah and Mike felt a mix of vindication and dread. The truth was finally going to be told, but the repercussions would be enormous. Suddenly, Mike tensed. "We've got company," he muttered. Sarah looked up to see several men in suits approaching from different directions. "FBI, they had been found." "Miss Chen," one of the agents called out, "step away from them, please." "Sarah Jenkins, Michael Dawson, you're under arrest." For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then chaos erupted. Alexis jumped to her feet, pulling out her press credential. "I'm a journalist, and these are my sources. You can't." But her words were drowned out by the commotion. Parkgoers were pointing and shouting, some recording with their phones. The FBI agents were closing in, hands on their weapons. Sarah and Mike exchanged a look. This was it. The moment of truth. In a move that surprised even themselves, they stood up slowly, hands raised. "We'll come quietly," Sarah called out, her voice carrying across the park. "But we have something to say first." The lead FBI agent hesitated, clearly thrown by their lack of resistance. "You have 1 minute," growled. Sarah took a deep breath and began to speak, her voice clear and strong. "We are not terrorists or thieves. We are veterans who chose to honor one of our fallen brothers, Lance Corporal James Wilson. In doing so, we uncovered a conspiracy that goes to the highest levels of our government." Mike picked up where she left off. "James died trying to expose this truth. We couldn't let his sacrifice be in vain. In 1 hour, the full story will be published. We only ask that you, the American people, read it and judge for yourselves." As they finished speaking, a strange hush fell over the crowd. Then, unexpectedly, someone began to clap. The applause spread, growing louder, punctuated by cheers and whistles. The FBI agents looked around, clearly uncomfortable with the public support for their suspect. The lead agent stepped forward, handcuffs ready. "Sarah Jenkins, Michael Dawson, you're under arrest for theft of military property and obstruction of justice." The cold metal closed around their wrists. Sarah and Mike stood tall, their heads held high. They had done what they set out to do. James's remains had been returned to his mother with dignity, and the truth he died for would finally be heard. Alexis caught Sarah's eye as they were being led away. "I'll make sure your story is told." As they were escorted to waiting vehicles, Sarah and Mike were surprised to see familiar faces in the crowd. Steel Angels, still in their leather jackets, had somehow made their way to D.C. Grizzly was there, nodding solemnly as they passed. The sight of their brothers and sisters, standing witness to this moment, filled Sarah and Mike with a sense of pride and belonging. Whatever happened next, they were not alone. As the car doors closed and they began to move, Sarah turned to Mike. "No regrets?" she asked softly. Mike shook his head, a small smile on his face despite the circumstance. "Not one. We did the right thing. Whatever comes next, we face it together." Sarah nodded, feeling a sense of peace settle over her despite the uncertainty of their future. They had completed their mission against all odds. They had honored James, exposed the truth, and in the process, found something precious in each other. As the cars pulled away, headed towards an uncertain future, Sarah and Mike sat tall, unbroken, and unafraid. They had done the unthinkable, and in doing so, had lived up to the highest ideals of the Steel Angels and the Marines they had once served with. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them with the same courage and integrity that had brought them this far. The story of the Steel Angels and their daring mission was far from over. In fact, as Alexis's article went live and the world began to react to the shocking revelations, it was clear that this was just the beginning of a much bigger story. A story of courage, loyalty, and the unbreakable bonds forged in the pursuit of justice. In the days following Sarah and Mike's arrest, the nation was plunged into turmoil. Alexis Chen's article, published as promised, sent shockwaves through the corridors of power in Washington, D.C. The conspiracy that James had uncovered, involving high-ranking officials selling classified information, was now public knowledge. The response was immediate and intense. Calls for investigations echoed across both houses of Congress. The implicated officials vehemently denied the allegations, but as more evidence came to light, their denials began to ring hollow. Meanwhile, Sarah and Mike found themselves at the center of a legal and moral maelstrom. They were being held in a federal detention center, facing serious charges. But public opinion was divided. To some, they were criminals who had stolen the remains of a fallen soldier. To others, they were heroes who had exposed corruption at the highest levels of government. Their lawyers, provided pro bono by a veterans advocacy group, worked tirelessly to build their defense. The legal strategy was twofold: argue that their actions were justified given the extraordinary circumstances, and push for leniency based on their service records and the positive outcome of their action. As the case gained national attention, an unexpected ally emerged. Senator Eleanor Hayes, a respected voice on military affairs and herself a veteran, took an interest in their case. She visited Sarah and Mike in detention, listening intently to their story. "What you did was illegal," she told them frankly. "But I believe it was also necessary. Sometimes the right thing and the legal thing are not the same. I'm going to do what I can to help you." True to her word, Senator Hayes began advocating for Sarah and Mike, both in the media and behind the scenes. She argued that prosecuting them to the fullest extent of the law would send the wrong message about how America treats those who expose wrongdoing, even if their methods are unorthodox. The senator's support marked a turning point. Other politicians, sensing the shifting public mood, began to speak out in favor of leniency. Veterans groups organized rallies and letter-writing campaigns, flooding the offices of the prosecutors and the Department of Justice. Pleas for clemency. Grizzly and the Steel Angels played a crucial role in this grassroots movement. They organized motorcycle rides across the country, raising awareness and gathering signatures for petitions. Their leather-clad presence at rallies and outside courthouses became a powerful symbol of solidarity. As pressure mounted, the prosecutors found themselves in a difficult position. The evidence against Sarah and Mike was clear-cut, but pursuing maximum charges in the face of such public support could be politically costly. In a bid to resolve the situation, they offered a plea deal. Sarah and Mike would plead guilty to lesser charges of mishandling of human remains and trespassing. In exchange, they would receive a suspended sentence and probation, avoiding jail time. It was a tempting offer, one that would allow them to put this ordeal behind them and return to their lives. But Sarah and Mike were hesitant. Accepting the deal felt like admitting they had done something wrong, when in their hearts, they believed they had done the right thing. After much deliberation and consultation with their lawyers, they made a counterproposal. They would plead guilty, but only if the government acknowledged the conspiracy they had exposed and committed to a full investigation. The negotiations were tense and protracted. The government was reluctant to admit to any wrongdoing, fearing it would open the door to a flood of lawsuits and further scandals. But as more evidence came to light and public pressure continued to build, they finally relented. In a historic press conference, the Attorney General announced a compromise. Sarah and Mike would plead guilty to mishandling of human remains, receiving probation, and community service. In return, the government would launch a full independent investigation into the conspiracy uncovered by James Wilson. Furthermore, the Attorney General announced the formation of a special committee to review and improve the protocols for returning fallen soldiers to their family, addressing the very issue that had sparked the Steel Angels' mission in the first place. As Sarah and Mike stood before the judge to enter their pleas, the courtroom was packed with supporters. Steel Angels lined the walls, standing tall and proud. James Wilson's mother, Margaret, sat in the front row, tears in her eyes as she watched the young people who had risked everything to bring her son home with dignity. After entering their pleas, Sarah and Mike were given the opportunity to address the court. Sarah spoke first, her voice steady and clear. Your Honor, we stand before you today not to make excuses for our actions, but to explain them. We broke the law, yes, but we did so to uphold a higher law. The law of honor, of respect for our fallen brothers and sisters in arms, and of truth in the face of corruption. Mike followed, his words resonating through the hushed courtroom. We don't regret what we did. We regret that it was necessary. We hope that the changes being implemented will ensure that no one ever has to make the choice we did again. And we stand ready to face the consequences of our actions, knowing that we stayed true to our values and our oath to defend this nation against all enemies, foreign and domestic. As the judge pronounced their sentence, 3 years probation and 1,000 hours of community service, a sense of relief washed over the courtroom. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was a resolution that allowed for justice while acknowledging the complex moral landscape of their action. Outside the courthouse, Sarah and Mike were greeted by a sea of supporters. Steel Angels, veterans, and ordinary citizens cheered as they emerged, free for the first time in weeks. The road ahead would not be easy. They still faced challenges in rebuilding their lives and careers, but they had each other and they had the support of a grateful nation. As they mounted their motorcycles, ready to ride away from the courthouse as free individuals, Sarah turned to Mike. "So, about that conversation we were supposed to have." Mike grinned, revving his engine. "How about we start it over dinner tonight?" Sarah smiled back, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. They had done the unthinkable, faced the consequences, come out the other side. Whatever the future held, they would face it together, supported by the unbreakable bonds of the Steel Angels and the knowledge that they had stayed true to their principles, no matter the cost. As they rode away, the roar of motorcycles filling the air, Sarah and Mike knew that their journey was far from over. But for the first time in a long time, the road ahead looked bright with possibility. In the months following their legal ordeal, Sarah and Mike found themselves at a crossroads. Their actions had thrust them into the national spotlight. With that came both opportunities and challenges. Offers poured in for book deals, movie rights, and speaking engagement. Everyone wanted to hear the story of the Steel Angels who had defied the government to honor a fallen Marine and expose a high-level conspiracy. It was tempting to cash in on their newfound fame, to turn their ordeal into a lucrative new career path. But as they sat in their favorite diner, sharing a quiet meal away from the public eye, Sarah and Mike realized that wasn't the direction they wanted their lives to take. "You know," Sarah said, pushing her coffee cup between her hands, "I keep thinking about James, about all the men and women like him who gave everything for their country." Mike nodded, understanding where she was going. "We've been given a platform. Maybe it's time we used it for something bigger than ourselves." That conversation marked a turning point in their lives. Instead of pursuing fame or fortune, Sarah and Mike decided to channel their energy and newfound influence into advocating for veterans' rights and reforming the systems that had failed James and so many others. They established the Wilson Memorial Foundation, named in honor of James. Its mission was twofold: to ensure that fallen soldiers were returned to their families with dignity and honor, and to provide support for veterans struggling to reintegrate into civilian life. The foundation quickly gained traction, attracting support from both grassroots organizations and high-level politicians. Sarah and Mike found themselves traveling the country, speaking at veterans events, meeting with lawmakers, and working tirelessly to effect real change. Their work didn't stop with advocacy. They organized motorcycle rides for PTSD awareness, set up job training programs for veterans, and established a network of peer support groups. The Steel Angels, under Grizzly's leadership, became the backbone of these efforts. Their leather-clad presence, a constant reminder of the strength and solidarity of the veteran community. This new direction wasn't without its challenges. They faced resistance from entrenched bureaucracies, skepticism from some quarters, and the ever-present risk of burnout. There were nights when the task seemed overwhelming, when the system seemed too big and too broken to change. But in those moments, they drew strength from each other, from the community they had built. Every thank you from a veteran who had found hope through their programs, every policy change they helped implement, reaffirmed that they were on the right path. 1 year after founding the Wilson Memorial Foundation, Sarah and Mike stood before a crowd of supporters, preparing to cut the ribbon on a new Veterans Resource Center. As they looked out at the sea of faces, Steel Angels, veterans, families, and community members, they felt a profound sense of purpose. "This," Sarah whispered to Mike, squeezing his hand, "this is why we did what we did. This is how we honor James and all the others like him." Mike nodded, his eyes shining with emotion. "We started this journey to bring one Marine home. Now we're helping bring thousands of veterans home in a different way." As they cut the ribbon, cheers erupting around them, Sarah and Mike knew they had found their true calling. The road that had begun with an unthinkable act of defiance had led them to a life of service, purpose, and love. It wasn't the future they had envisioned when they first joined the Steel Angels, but it was a future they embraced with open hearts and unwavering determination. The unthinkable had become the catalyst for real, lasting change. And for Sarah, Mike, and the Steel Angels, this was just the beginning of a new chapter in their ongoing mission to serve and protect, both on and off the battlefield. 5 years had passed since the day Sarah and Mike had made the decision to intercept James Wilson's remains. As they stood on the stage at the annual Wilson Memorial Foundation Gala, addressing a room full of supporters, veterans, and dignitaries, the journey that had brought them to this point felt almost surreal. Sarah, once a headstrong young veteran with a chip on her shoulder, had grown into a poised and influential advocate for veterans' rights. Her experiences had taught her the value of patience, diplomacy, and the power of working within the system to effect change. She had learned to channel her passion into effective action, becoming a respected voice in policy discussions at the highest levels of government. Mike, who had once been content to follow orders and keep his head down, had discovered a talent for organization and leadership. He had become the Foundation's operations director, overseeing a network of programs that spanned the country. His quiet strength and unwavering commitment had earned him the trust and respect of veterans from all walks of life. As they finished their speech and made their way through the crowd, shaking hands and exchanging words with supporters, they found a quiet moment together near the back of the room. "Can you believe how far we've come?" Mike asked, his voice low and reflective. Sarah shook her head, a small smile playing on her lips. "Sometimes I wake up thinking it's all been a dream, that we're still on the run or back with the Steel Angels, just riding and trying to find our place in the world." Mike chuckled, but his eyes were serious as he looked at Sarah. "You know, as crazy as that time was, I wouldn't change it for anything. It led us here, to this." Sarah nodded, understanding completely. Their journey had been fraught with danger, legal troubles, and moral dilemmas. But it had also been transformative, shaping them into the people they were today. They had learned the true meaning of courage, not just the physical bravery they had known as Marines, but the moral courage to stand up for what's right, even when it came at a great personal cost. They had discovered the power of unity, of what could be achieved when people came together for a common cause. As they mingled with the guests, Sarah and Mike reflected on how their relationship evolved. The spark that had ignited during their daring mission had matured into a deep, abiding love and partnership. They had married 2 years ago in a ceremony attended by Steel Angels, veterans, and even some of the officials they had once been at odds with. Their work with the Foundation had taught them patience and perseverance. Change, they had learned, often came slowly and in small increments. But each small victory, a new policy implemented, a veteran finding hope, a family receiving the closure they deserved, made the struggle worthwhile. Later that evening, as they stood on the balcony of their hotel room overlooking the city, Mike turned to Sarah with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever wonder what James would think of all this?" he asked softly. Sarah was quiet for a moment, considering. "I think he'd be proud," she said finally. "Not just of us, but of everyone who's come together to make a difference. We've turned his final mission into a legacy that's helping thousands." Mike nodded, his arm tightening around Sarah's waist. "You know, when we first started this, I thought we were just trying to right a wrong. I never imagined it would lead to all of this." Sarah leaned into him, a small smile on her face. That's the thing about doing what's right. You never know how far the ripples will spread. As they stood there, contemplating the journey that had brought them to this point, both Sarah and Mike felt a profound sense of gratitude. They had grown from impulsive, angry young veterans into leaders and advocates. They had learned to balance their passion with wisdom, their determination with compassion. The Steel Angels, too, had evolved. Under Grizzly's continued leadership, the club had become a powerful force for veteran support across the country. Their leather jackets and rumbling motorcycles were now a welcome sight at veteran events, a symbol of solidarity and strength. Sarah and Mike's legal troubles, once a source of fear and uncertainty, had become a badge of honor. They had shown a generation of veterans that it was possible to challenge the system and effect change, that their voices mattered. As they prepared for bed that night, Sarah paused, looking at a photo on the nightstand. It showed the original group of Steel Angels who had been involved in the mission to bring James home. Some faces were missing. Not everyone had made it through the past 5 years unscathed, but those who remained had become family in the truest sense of the word. We've all come so far, Sarah mused, tracing the faces in the photo. But in some ways, we're still those same angry, hopeful bikers who just wanted to do right by our brother. Mike came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. We're still fighting the good fight, he said softly, just in a different way now. As they drifted off to sleep that night, both Sarah and Mike felt a sense of peace and purpose. They had taken an unthinkable act, the interception of a fallen Marine's remains, and turned it into a movement that was changing lives. They had grown, individually and together, into the kind of leaders they had always hoped to serve under. The road ahead was still long, with many challenges yet to face. But they would face it, as they had faced everything else. Together, with the strength of the Steel Angels behind them, and the memory of James Wilson inspiring them forward. They had done the unthinkable, and in doing so, discovered the best versions of themselves. As dawn broke over the city, Sarah and Mike stood on the balcony of their hotel room, cups of coffee in hand, watching the world come to life below them. The Wilson Memorial Foundation Gala had been a resounding success, raising funds and awareness for their cause. But more than that, it had been a powerful reminder of how far they had come and the lives they had touched along the way. You know, Sarah said, her voice soft with reflection, when we first intercepted James's remains, I thought we were just doing right by one Marine. I never imagined it would lead to all of this. Mike nodded, understanding completely. We started out trying to honor one fallen brother and ended up creating a movement that's helping thousands. As they stood there, the themes that had defined their journey resonated stronger than ever. The power of standing up for what's right, even in the face of overwhelming odds. The strength found in unity and brotherhood. Transformative nature of love and purpose. And above all, the idea that sometimes doing the unthinkable is necessary to effect real change. Their story had become a testament to the enduring spirit of the Marine Corps motto, Semper Fidelis, always faithful. They had remained faithful to their fallen brother, to each other, and to the ideals they had sworn to uphold. As they prepared to face another day of advocacy and support for veterans, Sarah and Mike exchanged a look of determination and love. They had turned an act of defiance into a lifetime of service, transforming not just their own lives, but the lives of countless veterans and their families. The Steel Angels, once seen as rebellious bikers, had become synonymous with veteran support and solidarity. They had shown that sometimes it takes those willing to operate outside the system, change the system for the better. As they left their room, ready to continue their life's work, Sarah and Mike carried with them the memory of that first daring mission. It served as a constant reminder that with courage, love, and unwavering commitment to what's right, ordinary people can do extraordinary things. They had done the unthinkable, and in doing so, had reshaped the landscape of veteran care and recognition in America. Their journey, born from an act of defiance, had blossomed into a legacy of hope and change, would endure for generations to come.